Alright, so Star Rail has been in a bit of a weird spot recently. After close to a year in an extremely divisive region, it's finally wrapped up. There's been a decent amount of highs, but also a lot of lows throughout this past year, and I think that now that it's all over, it's time to start looking forward. And I do have to say, I'm a little bit concerned with what seems to be coming. I do want to clarify that I am definitely not trying to be a doom poster here, but I do try to be realistic. And as we now reach this point at the end of a patch cycle, to me at least, it seems like we might be entering a bit of another low streak pretty soon with the upcoming 3.8 patch, and also what will be coming after it. For a bit of context, for those of you that don't watch the HSR live streams when new patches are coming out, there's a few things that concern me with the most recent one for 3.8 that has led me to believe this. As a result, today I'd like to go over those things and kind of just discuss the state of Star Rail as a whole and what has made me feel the way I do about Star Rail right now. So let's talk about it. But first, if you are excited for what's coming in the future patch, or you just really like Dahlia, you might also be excited for a pretty big discount rolling for from today's sponsor, Rushbuy.gg. Rushbuy is a safe and reliable top-up site for all of your favorite gacha games, from Honkai Star Rail to Genshin Impact to Wuthering Waves. They've got you covered with discounts of up to 25%. For those of you that suck at math like me, if you wanted to buy the $100 pack, you'd only be paying $75 for it compared to if you bought it in the game. Like, let's be honest here, the prices of packs in gacha games can get pretty expensive, and every bit you can save counts, especially when you're going for a character like Dahlia. God, I need her. The best part is, they're extremely easy to use. All you've got to do is put in your UID and select your server, and your purchase will reach your account in seconds through the official game-approved channels. Rushbuy ensures that your data and personal info remains encrypted and secure, all while giving you these discounts, so you can be sure that your account will be perfectly okay while you're on your way to get your next anime girlfriend. If you do happen to have any issues, there's an insanely dedicated customer support team ready to solve any of your problems, so what are you waiting for? Click my link down in the description below and use my code for another 15% off. Thanks again to Rushbuy.gg for sponsoring today's video, and don't forget to join their end of year giveaway. Any order placed during the event can win up to $100. Anyway, so to start, let's talk about what's happening in 3.8. As a quick reminder, back at the anniversary for HSR, the devs let the player base know that at the end of Amphorius, we would be going back to Penacony. The reason for this was that in their eyes, the story didn't really have the neat ending that they were really hoping for. And honestly, I can't say that I really blame them for wanting to do this, as there were a lot of loose ends that were left behind. But regardless, we've now reached the point where the aforementioned return to Penacony is coming because Amphorius just recently finished, and there's a lot to talk about now that it's here. In theory, I should actually be kind of excited to go back to Penacony. I mean, honestly, I would say despite the problems it did have in terms of those loose ends I mentioned, for the most part I'd say I actually enjoyed that patch cycle. At least to me, the story was pretty fun, and I absolutely adored the region itself with the old school themes that it was portraying. I also loved the vast majority of the characters that were involved in Penacony, from Firefly to Dr. Rekka to Acheron. I mean, hell, speaking of Acheron, she's the only E2 character on my entire account, which kinda goes to show how invested I was back then. But with that said, what has me kind of really concerned right now is that they seem to be doing less of a, hey, let's go back and tie up the loose ends from Penacony, and more so a retcon of what happened during it. Like, instead of giving us a real way back to the region through some kind of neat plot device or an entirely new character, it seems like they're literally just throwing us back in and saying, hey, you know that region you were in forever ago? Well, you forgot some of it, so, have fun. And like, I don't think I really need to elaborate on why that's really strange, but just in case you need another reminder, we wrapped up the region of Penacony literally over a year ago. And let's be honest, most of us have forgotten some of the actual plot points, let alone whatever they might do with this retcon. And at least to me, there's a reason to be concerned there. Like, we might end up with a bigger mess of loose plot threads than we had previously. Like, well, yeah, Penacony absolutely wasn't perfect, and it did definitely deserve to get more added to it, just like, say, the Luofu did with the War Dance arc. At least personally, I don't know if what they've shown off in the trailers for 3.8 will end up making enough sense in terms of the overall plot and timeline. While I do have at least a little bit of faith in Hoyo to do a decent job telling a story after what they pulled off in some of the later Amphorius patches, it is still a fact to say that we have not seen anything like a retcon before, so it basically gives us zero baseline as to how it might end up. It could definitely be great, and I think that's undeniable, but it could also ruin what was actually good about Penacony despite the flaws it actually did have, and personally, that is really concerning to me. For example, do we really need to see another Firefly death? What happens if a character that previously everyone liked ends up being completely different in the story arc? What about the new character releasing? I mean, we hardly knew much about her at all, but they definitely seem to be a bit more of an antagonist considering they were part of the Annihilation Gang before, you know, Acheron annihilated them. In short, I'm pretty concerned as to what might happen with this patch's story because again, while Penacony wasn't perfect, it also wasn't some absolutely terrible flop that needs a ton of changes, and I really do worry that a retcon could make it lean more towards that bad side. At this point, we really just don't know enough, so while I'd like to look at the upcoming patch with some optimism, honestly it feels kinda difficult to look at it with anything more than skepticism. I really do hope I'm wrong here and they can fix the plot holes in Penacony without doing any kind of major retconning that makes the whole thing kinda confusing, but only time will tell and we'll just have to see once the patch releases next week. With all that said, the potential story retcons is unfortunately not the only thing I'm concerned about. The elephant in the room per se is that not only are we getting the story that's coming in 3.8 and whatever happens with it, but the patch itself is being extended by 2 weeks. And what that means is that if you take a look at the date right now, we won't actually be entering the 4.x patch cycle for another 2 months, or in other words, until a minimum of close to halfway through February. While I don't have a problem with waiting in itself, I'm a pretty patient guy, I do think considering how unexpected it was, it will definitely have some consequences that we'll probably be feeling for quite some time as players. And that is something that I think there are some problems with. To keep it extremely brief and not go into the nitty-gritty details, the speculated reasoning for this delay is due to Hoyoverse needing more time to work on the 4.x region because of some real-life circumstances with politics. In the meantime, as seen on the official livestream, pretty much all we're getting during the patch is a 3.8 story and some event reruns like we normally would. But with the 2-week extension, you would think there'd be more, and there just isn't really? Like, don't get me wrong, I get it. The real-life circumstances are very serious, and that means that Hoyo is basically on a crunch to get things changed and finished so that they can actually release 4.x, but I don't think it necessarily should come at the cost of us essentially having nothing to do until the update comes in February. For lack of a better way to put it, 3.8 is most likely going to feel like a super dead patch, which, at least in my eyes, is the exact opposite of what you want when you're going into a new region. This is when we should be building up hype and getting excited, but really, apart from the few teaser images that Hoyo just recently released back on Sunday night, there really isn't a whole lot to be excited for. It really is just a crappy situation all around because things will probably end up changing with the region, at least based on what we can guess from the new name, and those changes might not end up being for the best overall. Honestly, it's kind of sad to see a period of time that should be super exciting turn out to be one that isn't really at all. And at least personally, that's why I feel like it would have been really nice to have at least something here as like a get excited for 4.x event, even if it were really small so that we had something to look forward to. Like, I'm not asking for anything major here, but even something like a web event would be pretty nice to pad time and also keep people engaged for the upcoming region. And on that note, the other thing that I can see being a pretty big issue is that if there really is this massive crunch and they're all still working on and changing up the region, what will that mean for us as players going through it once the update releases? Like, I think it is very reasonable to be concerned about the state that it might release in, especially after how rough the launch of 3.x was. You know, will it still feel cohesive? Will characters that people are expecting still come out, or will they get redesigns compared to how they were intended to look? At least based on the teasers we got, it does seem like themes will be changing with the region because, I mean, hell, one of the teasers that we got literally looks like the devs said, hey, you know people really liked Belobog, right? So why don't we just make Belobog 2 with some more, pizzazz, I guess. But really, jokes aside, I am genuinely concerned for the 4.x update. It really felt like Hoyo was starting to get their stride back at the end of Amphorius, and a really good launch going into 4.x would have been a massive W for them. Unfortunately, something like this happening on top of an awkward retcon patch just before it doesn't really fill me with a whole lot of confidence that 4.x will launch with widespread appeal and no issues. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Hoyo planned to release a teaser at the Game Awards on the 11th, but who knows if that's still coming at this point. And for clarity real quick, I know this video is releasing after the Game Awards, so it might have happened, but again, at the time of recording at least, We just don't know. Really, I feel there needs to be something done here, even if it's not in-game content, so that we can have something to really look forward to. It is a real shame that in this period of time that again should be super exciting is instead filled with this kind of concern and skepticism that I've been talking about. No one wants to feel this way. I am sure that I am not alone in feeling that it would be great to be excited, but it is definitely difficult right now. I will throw Hoyo a bone here and say that they did throw in some extra banners to pad time, but I'll be straight honest, it feels completely out of left field that the banners are Sunday and Aglaya, especially because we're not really going to be doing anything with them in this patch, considering we're going back to Penacony for a story that's focused on neither of them. The break characters do make sense, though we're definitely missing a certain someone, but Sunday and Aglaya definitely don't make sense, and I feel like some quick short event where they both show up and interact might have been kinda nice. Also, post-editing Fleur here, they did also send us 1,000 jades and some fuel in the mail, which is definitely nice, don't get me wrong. But again, it also might have been nice to get a short event in game rather than just through the mailbox. One last thing that I feel is kind of concerning that I have to mention here that's mostly unrelated to scheduling and the future 4.x update is the state of the meta, or I guess what it'll be like during 3.8. Considering the banners that are running, the character releasing, and also the story focus of the patch, I think it is pretty safe to say that we are temporarily going to be going into a break meta again. I mentioned this in my last video, but to me, it almost feels like a last-ditch effort to make that archetype shine again, but I also don't feel like it's an effort that will last long-term. Regardless of what ends up happening with the 4.x update, we are definitely going to be getting something entirely new that will shake up the meta, and I really don't think that the upcoming one in 3.8 will end up lasting that long as a result. So that kinda just leaves the players that plan to skip over the short-term meta change in a strange spot where there's not really a whole lot to be excited for. Remember, in pretty much every mainstream gacha game, the characters are a huge chunk of the content. So if you're not planning on investing into that content, then that'll be 8 weeks of the game running a meta that you pretty much won't be able to interact with. Honestly, it's kinda like how Dot was very briefly shielded back in the early versions of 2.x, but a bit worse because this is literally for just one patch. And at least personally, I feel that's kinda awkward and doesn't leave those players in all that great of a spot for the time being, though I guess they do have the benefit of being able to save for whatever does end up happening in 4.x. Lastly, I do want to say here that I really do feel for Hoyo in this specific instance. No one asked for the stuff that's going on to be happening, and it's not really anyone's fault that it turned out the way it has right now. It is really genuinely sad to me that real life stuff can affect the games we love like this, because at the end of the day, we're just all here to play it and enjoy it, and I don't think anyone wants to see their favorite games like this. As I mentioned earlier, despite the flaws that Amphorius did have, especially with its earlier patches, for the most part I do think it's pretty undeniable that they started to find their stride again in the later patches, particularly after 3.4 with Finon. Honestly, if I look back on Amphorius as a whole, I have to say that I did end up enjoying it overall, which is wild to say for me considering how doom-posty some of my older videos were back around the anniversary. And again, I am really not trying to get back in that doom-posty mode right now. I would love nothing more than for it to be smooth sailing all the way into 4.x because I really have found my peace with this game, and I still enjoy it despite all the flaws that it does have. But again, I also do have to be realistic and talk about the state of the games and the problems that it has, which makes me really concerned for it, because they are very real problems that will affect the game that I've come to love. If anything, maybe it'll end up being something simple like a postponing of the original intended region of 4.x and us going to Plain Arcadia as just a temporary fix while all the political unrest is still going on. There is definitely ways it could be done cleanly, and I guess time will tell as to whether or not it turns out alright. At the very least, it seems like the characters might end up being the same based off of the character silhouette teaser, but who knows if they're going to get any kind of small redesign or something like that that takes it away from the original themes. I really do hope that the stuff going on can be resolved and we do end up going smoothly into 4.x, but at this point it is really hard to say if that will end up happening, and I don't have high expectations that it will. But again, here's to hoping though, and we'll just have to see what ends up happening long term. Anyway, that's all my thoughts, and I appreciate you listening if you made it this far despite the more negative tone of this video. If you have some thoughts of your own on this topic, I would love to hear about it, so feel free to leave a comment down below or join my Discord link down in the description to talk with me about it. As usual, thank you so much for watching, subscribe, and if you haven't already, maybe give my other videos a shot too.